Can the fifth repetition increase muscle mass? Many people enjoy challenging themselves with heavy weights during training because it leads to rapid strength improvement. But does this high-intensity, heavyweight training help with muscle growth? Today, we will understand this through several experimental data. VS and colleagues recruited 44 untrained men and divided them into low, medium, and high repetition groups. All groups trained with 4 sets of squats, resting 6 minutes between sets, 3 times a week for 7 weeks. The low repetition group used weights with 3 to 5 RM per set. The medium repetition group used 13 to 15 RM per set, and the high repetition group used 23 to 25 RM per set. All groups aimed to gradually increase the load throughout the study. The results showed similar increases in quadriceps thickness across all 3 groups. This study indicates that repetitions fewer than 5 can still lead to hypertrophy. Manager and colleagues divided 33 men with 2 years of training experience into an intensity group and a volume group, training 4 times a week for 8 weeks with the above-mentioned exercises. The intensity group performed 4 sets per exercise with 3 to 5 repetitions per set at 90% of 1 RM, resting 3 minutes between sets. The volume group also performed 4 sets per exercise with 10 to 12 repetitions per set at 70% of 1 RM, resting 1 minute between sets. Both groups aimed to gradually increase the load throughout the study. The results showed statistically similar increases in the cross-sectional area of the quadriceps, lateral thigh muscles, pectoral muscles, and triceps. The intensity group's arm mass increased significantly more, according to DEXA scan measurements of lean mass in the legs and arms. Therefore, repeating 3 to 5 times and repeating 10 to 12 times are equally effective. One limitation of this study is that the intensity group rested for 3 minutes between sets, while the volume group rested for only 1 minute. In our video on rest intervals, we showed that studies suggest resting 3 minutes between sets is more effective for muscle growth than 1 minute. Considering this, the volume group might have been at a disadvantage. Campos and colleagues divided 27 untrained men into low, medium, and high repetition groups. All groups trained with leg presses, squats, and seated leg extensions for 8 weeks, training 3 times a week for the first 4 weeks and 4 times a week for the last 4 weeks. The low repetition group performed 4 sets per exercise with 3 to 5 RM, resting 3 minutes between sets. The medium repetition group performed 3 sets per exercise with 9 to 11 RM, resting 2 minutes between sets. The high repetition group performed 2 sets per exercise with 20 to 28 RM, resting 1 minute between sets. Different numbers of sets were used to ensure equal volume load across groups. The low and medium repetition groups had similar increases in the cross-sectional area of the lateral thigh muscles, both significantly greater than the high repetition group. This study also supports the effectiveness of fewer than 5 repetitions for muscle growth. There are many similar studies, and despite each having different limitations, it is evident that heavyweight training with fewer than 5 repetitions can indeed increase muscle mass. If your primary goal is to increase strength while gaining some muscle, using 3 to 5 repetitions may be very effective. If your goal is muscle growth, to be cautious, it may be best to ensure most of your training is within the 5 to 12 repetition range. What are the most important factors for muscle growth? We often receive various training plans and supplement suggestions, but few people know the impact of these factors on muscle growth. To avoid taking detours, you must understand the muscle-building variable pyramid. 1. Consistency. At the top of the pyramid is consistency. Regardless of any training or diet plan, the cycle is measured in months or years. If you can't consistently execute, there will be no results. Even with haphazard training and eating, you will see decent muscle growth as long as you persist. Stars 2. Effort. The second most important factor is effort, which refers to training intensity and training volume. These are the 2 main variables responsible for stimulating muscle growth. Training intensity. This refers to how close you are to muscle failure. Generally, insufficient training intensity leads to inadequate muscle stimulation. However, training too close to failure can lead to diminishing returns and affect recovery. Training close to failure is enough to promote muscle growth with an RIR, repetitions in reserve, of about 5 or less. Training volume. This refers to the total number of sets per muscle group per week. More training volume can lead to faster muscle growth, but beyond a certain number of sets, there will be diminishing returns. It is generally recommended that each muscle group trains about 10 to 20 sets per week as a reasonable guideline for promoting muscle growth. 3. Diet. The next crucial factors are calorie intake and protein. Caloric surplus. Calories and protein are the raw materials for building muscle tissue. If calorie intake is insufficient, muscle growth will be limited even with adequate training. Protein intake. Protein provides the essential amino acids for muscle tissue synthesis. Therefore, our diet needs to have enough protein to build new muscle tissue. Studies have found that the threshold for diminishing returns is around 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. While diet supports muscle growth, remember that nutrition does not stimulate muscle growth. Training does. Without training stimulus, even a well-balanced diet will not lead to muscle growth. 4. Secondary training factors. These include all training variables other than volume and intensity, such as repetition range, training frequency, rest time, lifting techniques, etc. Although changing some factors can accelerate muscle growth, they will have little impact if you do not put enough effort into training. Muscle growth is a very forgiving adaptation state. Essentially, any training within the range of 5 to 30 repetitions can induce muscle growth. Many studies show that training each muscle twice or thrice a week results in more muscle growth, but the difference is not substantial. 5. Sleep and stress management. While there is little evidence that poor sleep and high stress levels inhibit muscle growth, it is known that fatigue and stress can affect performance and strength in training. Occasional lack of sleep or stress will not cause significant issues in the long run, but chronic sleep deprivation and excessive emotional stress can severely interfere with training and nutrition practices. 6. Secondary nutritional factors. These include factors other than daily caloric and protein intake, such as meal timing, protein frequency, carbohydrate to fat ratio, protein quality, micronutrients, etc. As long as you get enough calories and protein and provide adequate training stimulus, these factors will have little impact on muscle growth. Here are some suggestions. Eat about 3 to 5 meals a day, each containing solid protein. Consume at least 0.5 grams of fat, 2 grams of carbohydrates, and 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. Distribute these evenly throughout the day. Once these minimum requirements are met, the ratio of fats to carbohydrates will not significantly affect the results. 7. Micronutrients. While they do not have a significant direct impact on muscle growth, they are important for overall health and can be supplemented as needed. 8. Supplements. Fitness supplements have no effect without consistent training and adequate diet practices. Some supplements can provide small benefits. Creatine is known to effectively improve maximum strength and repetitions, which can help with hypertrophy. Protein powder is convenient for some, but not necessary if you prefer getting your protein from food. Caffeine, similar to creatine, can enhance cognitive function, alertness, and attention, with about 0.5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, providing useful benefits. Other supplements might be beneficial for muscle growth, but beyond these three, the effects are relatively vague, so there is no need to focus too much on them. Understanding these factors helps clarify where to focus your energy for effective muscle growth without unnecessary detours. What is the best time for muscle growth? Experienced bodybuilders know that our bodies have an internal biological clock responsible for regulating all physiological functions. For instance, certain times of the day see higher hormone levels, and understanding this can help you get stronger faster. A 2016 study compared the effects of morning versus evening strength and endurance training on strength gains, hypertrophy, and serum hormone concentrations. They recruited 42 young men and assigned them to either morning or evening training sessions. The morning group trained between 6:30 a.m. and 10 a.m., while the evening group trained between 4:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. for a period of 24 weeks. The results showed that strength and endurance training in the evening led to greater muscle growth. Other studies have found similar results. For example, one study divided bodybuilders into two groups. One group trained before noon and the other trained after 6 p.m. The results also indicated that those who trained after 6 p.m. gained significantly more muscle. Why is evening training more effective for strength and muscle growth? 1. Higher muscle protein synthesis signals. Muscle anabolic signals are higher in the afternoon and evening after training. 2. Favorable testosterone to cortisol ratio. In the afternoon, you have a more favorable ratio of testosterone to cortisol. Although testosterone levels might be higher in the morning, they are offset by equally elevated cortisol levels. 3. Peak body temperature. Body temperature peaks later in the day, enhancing muscle activation, energy metabolism, nervous system efficiency, and blood flow to muscles. All these factors can lead to better performance and faster progress. Therefore, if your schedule allows, training between 2 p.m. and 11 p.m. might yield better results. Does mind-muscle connection really help muscle growth? Mind-muscle connection refers to the intentional focus on contracting specific muscles to provide targeted stimulation during strength training. In practice, our mental focus can be projected in two ways during strength training. 1. Internal focus, concentrating on contracting the muscles being trained, keeping all the pressure on specific muscle groups. 2. External focus, concentrating solely on moving the weight from point A to point B. Which of these methods leads to more muscle growth is still a debated topic, as we don't have much evidence on this subject. As of today, only one study directly assessed the hypertrophy results from these different focuses. This study compared the growth of the quadriceps and biceps during seated leg extensions and barbell curls. The first group used an internal focus, constantly keeping attention on the target muscle, while the second group used an external focus, focusing only on lifting the weight. The results were somewhat contradictory. The biceps showed significantly more hypertrophy with an internal focus, while both groups saw similar quadriceps growth under both conditions. The mixed results from this study could be due to differences in lifting techniques. Barbell curls, as a free weight exercise, are more susceptible to technical variations, whereas seated leg extensions, being a fixed machine exercise, do not allow for significant changes in force application technique. Additionally, arms are more frequently used in daily life compared to legs, making it easier to concentrate on them. Another point to consider is that an external focus often allows lifting more weight and performing more repetitions. For example, a study investigating the effects of different attentional focuses on squat and deadlift performance found that subjects could perform 1 to 2 more repetitions when they focused solely on moving the weight compared to an internal focus. This suggests that an internal focus might somewhat impair strength performance due to stricter technique control, whereas an external focus might achieve higher performance by sacrificing some control. In multi-joint compound movements, more muscle groups are involved, and there is a higher demand on the cardiovascular system, leaving less mental focus for the target muscles. In contrast, isolation exercises involving fewer muscles and lower cardiovascular demand allow for more focused attention on muscle connection. However, this does not mean isolation exercises will lead to more hypertrophy. Evidence suggests that in compound exercises, focusing on specific muscles can indeed prioritize training those muscles. For instance, a study on bench press training with different attentional focuses found that using an internal focus during lifting led to greater activation of certain muscle fibers, which could be beneficial for muscle hypertrophy over time. In conclusion, when you can safely and correctly perform an exercise, you should strive to improve your ability to control the muscles with your mind. This can indeed be beneficial for targeted muscle hypertrophy.